Serious, socially fluent people of Reddit, what are some mistakes you see socially awkward people making? I heard a quote once that helps me whenever I talk to strangers. Confidence is when you walk into a room and assume everyone already likes you. Obviously, this isn't true for every case, but in my experience, if you start off every interaction by imagining that good feelings exist, good feelings will actually exist. Everyone just wants to be liked. So if you pretend they already like you, you'll like them, and then they'll be happy that you already like them. It's a warm, fuzzy cycle. A mistake I see that socially awkward people make is assuming that everyone doesn't like them, and then the cycle becomes awkward, rather than warm and inviting. I don't consider myself amazingly socially fluent, but I work with a lot of engineers who make me feel like I am in comparison. The biggest mistake that I see them making is talking about themselves, or their work, non-stop without acknowledging that there's another person in the conversation. It's like, dude, you're in a conversation. Pause sometimes. Gauge the other person's interest. Ask a question of them occasionally. I feel like I should have noted that I'm also an engineer. Well, more of a scientist in terms of my job now, so I have nothing against engineers. It's just something that I've noticed frequently among my colleagues. Also look for signs that the other person is done with the conversation, and wrap it up. If you've been speaking non-stop for half an hour about something and the other person is fidgeting and starting to avoid eye contact and has tried several times to interrupt you with, well, I've got to get, for God's sake let them leave. Taking their mistakes too seriously. Being an anxious person myself, I get that freaking up and saying you too to the waiter or the ticket person is embarrassing. But you're literally one face of thousands they have to deal with every day. What I usually do after freaking up like that to avoid that dark, memory-filled shame hole in my brain is to just explain my frick up in an amused tone, laugh at myself, and move on. I bet you any money they'll remember you more for your flustered behavior afterwards rather than the initial frick up. I've met a lot of people who speak in very self-deprecating ways to an uncomfortable extent. I understand not wanting to appear vain and opting to humble oneself, demonstrating self-awareness. However, some people will take this a bit too far. When speaking about yourself, do so with confident modesty. Don't reduce yourself to only your flaws. One of the most important things is to understand who you're talking to and make the conversation match the relationship. How you talk to a stranger, service worker, close friend, and family are all different. Context is everything, and what's perfectly acceptable or even amicable to say to one person is not acceptable to say to another. I've met people who are friends of friends, work acquaintances, or strangers who think they can get away with doing something only a close friend or relative could do, such as a ball-busting joke or overly honest opinion, and come off as a total butt and usually turn the entire group off. Just because I've called my best friend of 9 years a silly, drunken ape at a bar, doesn't necessarily mean you can do the same if you just met him. These things require a certain amount of social currency. If you haven't built up a wealth of it, you can't afford it. Not noticing when they are telling an irrelevant story to a service worker or stranger. The number of waitresses that I see dancing on the spot while waiting for a customer to stop talking is astounding. Or anyone. The never-ending boring story is painful at parties too. I used to be quite socially awkward. I'm still an introvert, but I've learned to turn it on off very easily. I've found the one basic thing very awkward people tend to do that totally screws them, is trying to prepare for a situation or contemplate what they will do. Go through scenarios in their heads. What happens is that once they get into the actual situation, they spend a ridiculous amount of time matching everything that happens to what they wanted to happen. Then you get that weird and very awkward lag time effect where you will ask a person a question and they stall and break and use filler words. Best thing to do is to not really factor in people being part of something socially speaking. If you notice very socially fluent people will pretty much take other people at face value as opposed to trying to investigate them in their heads. Example, you want to invite your friends to the movies. Socially awkward. Thinks about every single one of his friends' potential motives. Changes mind on 2 of them. Ends up not asking. Or does ask but in a really weak tone because he's already thought up like 6 scenarios in which they don't go. Socially adept. "Hey, you guys want to go to the movies?" doesn't mine any further than thinking that people might want to go to the movies. If you get that, all the other peccadillos usually fade away more or less. Sometimes you need to be a cheerleader in a conversation. "I did this. You did that. Hey, great. Did you hear he did that?" If it's sincere, it goes a long way. Similarly, if someone gets cut off by a monopolizer, listen to them and encourage them to finish their story. Oftentimes, socially awkward people go into a conversation with the intention of asking about 2 or 3 specific topics with nothing else in mind. Typically those topics run out fast and they have no idea how to respond to something that doesn't fit in with what they were planning to mention. It takes practice, I guess, but just being ready to roll with whatever topic arises will help you immensely. Thinking that being an introvert is the same thing as being socially awkward. The introvert-extrovert scale runs on the x-axis and social skills run on the y-axis. It is entirely possible to be a socially skilled introvert just like you can have a socially awkward extrovert. One of the biggest mistakes I see socially awkward introverts make is conflating those two issues and thinking, "Well, my personality is introverted, therefore I am socially awkward." Social skills are skills and they can be improved. Thinking, "I'm an introvert," gives people an excuse to not work on or practice those skills. Really cool that this is getting a lot of positive responses. Great to see all these socially skilled introverts represent. The responses have made one thing really clear: no matter how introverted you are, or believe yourself to be, you absolutely can improve your social skills. And the mistake, to address the original question in this thread, is to let "I'm introverted" stop you from practicing improving your social skills. Stop talking about super personal stuff to strangers. It doesn't make anyone know you better, it just makes them really uncomfortable. You don't have to always be talking. At the same time, don't be as silent as the grave. There's a happy medium where good conversations live. I was going to mention this one. Just because there's silence doesn't mean you have to fill it with chatter. It can be awkward for someone to just keep talking at times and comes off poorly. Trying to have a comment on everything. It's perfectly fine to remain mostly quiet throughout conversations that either don't intrigue you or you know little about. I'm easily the loudest and most verbose member of my group, but sometimes the topic changes to one I'm not a large part of and I'll be a much smaller part of it. Letting themselves be spoken over or ignored. Stand up for yourself. If anyone takes offense, they were probably the butthole talking over you. Related, if you are at dish and catch yourself interrupting people, say "Sorry, I interrupted you, go on." I've found people tolerate these tendencies a lot more if you do this. The worst in my books is people who only talk about themselves. I have a friend who has otherwise very strong social skills. He can easily talk with new people and comes off completely normal. His only problem is narcissism. He'll constantly cut you off mid-conversation to say something loudly about himself, but also gets furious if you interrupt him. If you try to talk to him about something that happened to you, his first response is immediately to tell you something that happened to him that was similar. There are no questions or comments about your story. Also, he thinks he's perfect, so everything that is wrong in his life is the fault of some freaking moron. He's entirely unwilling to admit any flaws that he has. Not sure how this is considered strong social skills. He just sounds like an idiot with no social skills. I've noticed they stick to topics they know you have in common. I have one friend who only talks about weed with me, never tries to find out what else we have in common. Another friend only talks about video games. He never switches topics. Barely once in a while you need to switch it up. Find more common ground to keep it interesting. This might go against what a lot of people think, and in fact I read many comments on how you should do this, but when I was in my undergrad years I had to take mandatory public speaking fundamentals of speech classes. My professor told us the following: if you are talking to someone face to face one-on-one with less than a few feet between the two of you, it is unbelievably obvious when you're looking at their forehead, or at their nose, or somewhere else that's meant to look like you're staring at their eyes. So don't do it. It makes you look silly. If you are speaking to several people, an audience in a closed room, do not look at the back wall. Once again, very noticeable. Makes you look silly. In both of these situations, you need to make quick, subtle, fluid eye contact. However, if you are giving a speech to a massive audience, think auditorium, pep rally, political debates, then as long as you aren't looking at your feet, it doesn't matter. No one can tell at this point. A lot of them seem to be bad at preliminary small talk and have complained that it's useless or pointless. Sure, getting any rain out your way won't get you far, but it gets the ball rolling. A movie doesn't start with the climax. It starts small and then gets big. Just practice. The worst thing a stranger might say about you is, "Wow, that dude was kinda weird." No one is going to witch hunt you because you seemed awkward. To all the people bitching about how bad it is to be seen as awkward, do you think musicians were suddenly good at what they were doing? Number. They sucked mad dong for years before they got good, and people heard them suck mad dong. Now get out there and suck some mad dong at socializing so you can get better. You're gonna be dead in less than 100 years. I guarantee that cashier is not going to remember that awkward guy. Source: I'm a cashier. I think this is really important. But remember that practice is not just repetition. You have to be trying to improve. Pay attention to what you are doing and tweak things and remember what works and what doesn't. Repetition alone will show gradual improvements, but real practice will make a much bigger impact. Not knowing when you're not wanted, like interrupting a conversation between two people who are closed off to the outside world, leaning towards each other, 100% engaged in conversation, and not knowing when someone isn't interested in talking to you, feet pointing away, polite smile. I'm always afraid of stepping over this boundary. If everyone is chatting as a group, I feel like I can't jump in because it would be rude, which probably makes me seem extra awkward because I'm too quiet. I've spent a good chunk of my career in software sales, so that means a lot of socializing. The biggest mistakes, or awkward moments, I've seen coming from a few underlying situations. 1. Too much self-deprecation or self-grandiosity. It's one thing to joke you have a dad bod after a meal, but to point out how fat or out of shape you are in detail makes people awkward. Likewise, talking about how great you are to the point of bragging makes you unlikable. There's a happy sweet spot in the middle. 2. Not understanding that conversations change topics quickly, and just because you had a great story for one topic doesn't mean you can pull everyone back to that moment from 3 minutes ago. With that being said, the best socially fluent people will recognize that you had something to say, but didn't have the chance to say it, and will invite you to contribute. Steve, I think you were going to mention something about traveling to the Grand Canyon. Have you been? 3. Hygiene and grooming. It's amazing how quickly a poorly dressed or smelly person will kill a moment. Iron your shirts, get proper fitting pants, and make sure to wear deodorant. Get a good haircut, not some supercuts hack job. Beards are awesome, but keep it groomed. That doesn't mean short, but properly manicured facial hair is better than patchy or unkempt manes. 4. Ask questions, and then shut up. This one is key. If you're asked a direct question, then talk. End your portion with a question or prompt for the other person to talk. 5. Shake hands firmly. Look people in the eye. Say their name. 6. Excuse yourself when you leave a table or group. You don't need an excuse, unless you're one-on-one. A simple, "Oh, excuse me for a moment" works. A friend of the family has limited social skills, and all of his anecdotes are from television and movies. In particular, odd fantasy sci-fi flicks that have limited audiences. He constantly makes inside jokes or refers to them, and everyone looks at each other and goes, "We have no idea what you're talking about." Don't try to be funny if you're not. If you're not sure, the default is you're not. If what you're about to say relies heavily on TV or movies, skip it and just say what you wanted to say. If someone tells a joke, bask in it. Don't repeat what they said and then laugh at it. That's just weird. We all just heard it, too. I'm not sure about this one. When someone repeats the punchline of one of my jokes and laughs, that's how I know it's especially funny. It usually makes me feel all warm inside. Honestly, some awkward people simply just don't listen to what others are saying and what is going on around them. Either they are too nervous about the situation, and are too caught up in their own internal dialogue to closely pay attention to others, or they are simply trying too hard to be outgoing and be friendly with everyone, not listening, and end up off topic. or blurting out the wrong thing. Part of being social is being able to listen to and read other people's emotions and responses, and respond accordingly. For example, I'm an outgoing guy who sometimes makes crass jokes. However, I never really offend people as far as I'm aware, because I can usually read people and tell early on if a joke is going too far, or if they wouldn't appreciate that kind of humor. So if I feel that I'm starting to approach that line, I'll back off a bit, and everyone is comfortable again. So I think for most awkward people, they would be most helped just by having better situational awareness, and paying closer attention to how others are acting and feeling. Also, if you do end up in an awkward situation by making a bad joke or saying the wrong thing everyone does sometimes, then the best way to deal with it is just to call it out. People will understand and probably think that's funny. For example, I make a joke that just isn't funny at all. I'll realize no one is laughing and say something like swing and a miss, acknowledging my crappy joke and calling it out. Or, if I end up making a joke that goes a bit too far and makes some people feel awkward, I'll realize this and say something like, so that was the line. Ha, I just crossed it, which both acknowledges that people are uncomfortable and then cuts the tension a bit with laughter. It shows that you are being aware and considerate of others. Don't be constantly negative and complain about everything. Maybe your life is in total shambles, and while that's quite unfortunate, we don't want to constantly hear about your woe. If some big event happens, like you also files for divorce, feel free to talk about it, but don't constantly tell us how crappy every day of your life is. Similarly, don't be overly critical negative of things others do. If someone spent $60,000 on some new BMW, don't say how that's a massive waste of money that will turn into nothing but regret in a few years. No matter how right you are, raining on everyone's parade will turn people off to you. Keeping conversations going when no one else is into it. Conversations naturally die off, usually within a minute or two. It's okay to say see you later and walk away. One conversation lever I like is alright, well, I don't want to keep you, because it acknowledges that the convo is over and lets them make an easy escape without being too blunt. Body language. It's very easy to see if a person is uncomfortable, and by nature it makes other people uncomfortable. Relax your shoulders. Lift your chin a little so your chest and neck open. Let your eyes relax a bit. No scared wide eye please. Smile just a little. The kind of smile you make when you take a big sip of something warm like hot cocoa. Look in the mirror. That is how you look when you exude approachable and easy to engage with. Mind your voice tone too. Nerves come through in a voice. People apologizing for things that aren't necessary, out of their control, or apologizing for a mistake that only the socially awkward person perceives as a mistake. For example, if you're on a first date, sorry it's raining out. Sorry, I didn't know you had a brother. Sorry, I didn't mean to bump shoulders. Oh sorry, my hand touched your leg. Sorry, I exist. You must not have met many British people. Socially inept person here kinda. I feel the biggest mistake most of us make is not trying to improve. I read lots of body language books and stuff like how to win friends and influence people. My psychiatrist says I'm the mildest case of ASD he's seen. My brother says when I'm not depressed I can pretty much pass for normal, even charming once in a while. And I think it's mostly because I'm trying to improve instead of just accepting my fate. But the worst thing I see that I used to do a lot is talk about yourself, especially if it's a complaint. It brag about your life, like it's okay once in a while, but if that's all you talk about then people think you're annoying. The biggest mistake that socially awkward people make is caring too much about how they come off to others. Stop trying to emulate and create your own success. Be yourself, have fun. The fact that your joke flopped isn't what's awkward, it's that you actually assign some value to that lack of reaction. Be yourself, but I am socially awkward as myself. In my younger days I used to frequent nightclubs. 5 years ago is a long time to grow up, but it happens at bars as well. I people watch. It's weird. I get bored and I start looking for socially awkward people. If I'm on a balcony watching people dance, I look at the group of guys who are molesting a group of girls and build up courage to take the flock of men to try and approach these women. The alpha male decides it's time and I watch them snake through the dance floor. One guy asks the girl to dance and he sorta points to the rest of his buddies like, I have friends for your friends, all the while watching the line of men behind this guy awkwardly standing around. Then I watch as this line of guys continues on their journey to the other side of the dance floor unvictorious. The other one is watching a guy at a bar pull out his phone all the time as if someone is texting trying to look important. Again, perched on a balcony or some crap. I use my eagle eye vision to zoom in sometimes to see that they are in fact scrolling through Facebook or Instagram. I just realized I'm a socially awkward stalker. People watching is great and often surprisingly amusing, if you have the time. Must strike the balance between looking creepy and trying too hard not to look creepy while you're doing it, though. There are a few that stand out, and it's not because I am socially awkward or socially fluent that I understand these. It's because I know I am being awkward when I am doing them. 1. Not sitting still during a conversation is very distracting and can make for an awkward vibe. I am not saying lack expression with your hands when talking or anything like that, but cut out the anxious tics. 2. Not making eye contact is definitely a no-no. Be sure to make eye contact, and while doing so, make sure you are consciously looking at the person, not through them. A caveat to this, staring too deep can be awkward. Sometimes, it's nice to look away briefly or even take the time to look away during a deep thought or something that allows a break from the staring contest. 3. Do not talk fast and breathe normally. I think a lot of socially awkward people get so caught up in the anxiety of the conversation, they forget to enunciate properly and breathe. Just relax. Think before you speak. Speak slow and with directed intent and relax. 4. Relax. 5. Relax. 6. Relax. No one is going to hurt you. A slight stutter or pause does not ruin the flow of a conversation, and most people don't suck. Did I say relax? Just relax. Not picking up on body language. So many times I see people telling a story or explaining something and just completely unable to pick up on the fact that the listeners aren't interested, despite it being plain as day. When you tell a story or a joke, don't get hung up on superfluous detail. What usually matters is the delivery, not the details. If the joke doesn't hinge on the girl being a redhead, then don't worry about saying she's a brunette or a blonde, or whatever. If you want to tell me about going out to drink with your friends, I don't care if it was Wednesday of the 3rd week of July in 2014. It was a summer night will suffice. You're trying to convey an emotion, not show your work on a math problem. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.